I'd like to start our talk, our panel tonight, with a word about Kevin Sloan. Kevin, as many of you, I'm sure many of you have had the chance of getting to know Kevin. Unfortunately, he left us too early, way too early, a couple of years ago. But Kevin was one of these inspirational people that you meet once in a while in your life. Kevin was a teacher, a scholar, a friend. He loved Dallas. He was original in his thinking. He was generous with his time and with his ideas, with his observations, and we miss him every day. Many of the things that you will see here have a root in Kevin's observations and thinking about Dallas. So I'd like to dedicate our panel tonight to the memory of Kevin Sloan. One of the many things that Kevin taught us is that Dallas happens to be on the same latitude as cities like Casablanca, Tripoli, and Haifa. And if you think about it, you go, really? Casablanca and Dallas, are they in the same latitude? Yes, they are. Now, you look at Casablanca, Tripoli, and Haifa, and you see a certain type of urban fabric, a certain type of urban environment. Those cities know how to work with the climate, with the extreme heat, today, for instance. And Dallas, somehow, in its brazen ways, decided to go, in a different way, different route. Patrick, this is up your alley, right there. Scenic view, that's right. Sometimes Dallas try hard to emulate Haifa, as you can see on the right, the arches, etc., but, doesn't quite work. Yet, Dallas is a growing city. It's the fourth largest metro area in the country, according to the US Census by now. New York, Los Angeles, Chicago are ahead of Dallas, but think about it, the fourth largest place. However, size and density are not the same thing. And I overheard Patrick and Julia just talking about density, discussing density issues just a few minutes ago before the panel started. And when I see this figure, this graphic that, in fact, again, Kevin shared with us, it's a shock, right? About 1 person per acre, and if you think about it, over 7 million people in the metroplex, and 1 person per acre in our city, in our area. That something is not right. Something is off. I'm not suggesting that we try to be like New York or even San Francisco. No, that's not what I'm suggesting at all. However, other cities in the country that are known to be pleasant places, Portland, Boulder, Madison, Wisconsin, with densities between 3 and 7 people per acre, they feel pretty good. They are livable places. By the way, for comparison's sake, Park cities, just on the other side, University Park and Highland Park, just on the other side of Highway 75, has a density of about 4 people per acre. So you have an idea there of what we are talking about. When I think of Dallas and urbanism and planning, I think of Kevin Sloan, but I also think of Ed Baum. In his own peculiar ways, he made this point a few times. He would make this point a few times. Dallas is a place where the future always looks better than the past. And if you know Ed Baum, you know that he's ironic, sometimes even sarcastic. And I never knew, what do you mean, Ed? Do you mean that the place is, half full, half empty, is this a pessimist vision of the city? Is this an optimist vision of the place? What is it? Now, if you think that the cup is half empty, well, you go, Dallas has never fulfilled its promise, has never fulfilled its potential, and it will never do. If you are on the optimist side, you go, well, better days are ahead. And Dallas is getting there. We are getting closer to it. So I prefer to be on the optimist side. I have, as Nate said, I have been here for 25 years. I'm not going anywhere. So I bet on the good side, on the positive side. Dallas is growing. Dallas has grown by, in terms of job growth, as you can see, 6.5% in the year that ended in October of 2022. That rate is higher than the rate for Los Angeles and New York. That means that our city, our metroplex, if we keep growing at this pace, it means that we will increase, the population will increase by 3.4 million people in 22 years. That's a lot of people. To put it in perspective, nothing like a visual aid, right? Put it in perspective, 7.8 million people represented here by the colorful people. Los Angeles has about 3.8 million people, Chicago 2.7 million people. In 22 years, we will be adding another Chicago or another Los Angeles to our metroplex. And by the way, Chicago and Los Angeles are not growing at that pace. Now, growth, for growth's sake, doesn't help anyone. I think that growth, if it's the good type of growth, enables change, and that's what we'd like to see. Sorry, I went the other way. Let's look at some tables. Some data that came straight from the Census Bureau. As we all know, Texas is the second largest economic engine of the country, just behind California, ahead of New York, ahead of Florida, ahead of Illinois. But the important thing here in this chart that I want to highlight to you is that Texas' share of the national GDP is growing. As you can see, it in 2021 was 8.55%. In 22, it was 8.69%. If you look at the other states, California has also grown. Its share has also grown. But the share, New York's share, Florida's share, and Illinois' share, they are either stable or they have decreased, which means that Texas is on a growing path. I have 3 more charts to share with you. This is about education. Again, all from the Census Bureau. Migrants to Texas tend to be more educated than the state population. What does that mean? It means that we are raising the overall level of education in the state and in Dallas, Houston, Austin, San Antonio. That's a good thing. Movers to Texas more likely to work in STEM and management. Again, good thing, because it means that we have jobs, we have available jobs at higher paying jobs, better jobs, and those jobs are attracting a skilled workforce. And finally, international migrants to Texas are bolstering the diversity of the state. And again, a good thing. The more diverse, the more dynamic, the more vibrant culture, the more vibrant society we have. So these, I think, in my opinion, are the types of the type of data that shows enabling growth. So with that, we took a quick tour through geography, through demographics, through the economy, and I would like to ask our panel now, Patrick, Julia, and Tamala, do we have a chance? We will be looking at the recent past of Dallas and the future, and trying to make sense of everything. We have 3 amazing panelists tonight. You may know of them, and Nate briefly introduced them, but I'd like to give you a few more details about each one of them. My friend Patrick Kennedy is a founding partner in the Dallas-based urban design firm Space Between Design Studio. He's a planner and urban designer with 20 years of experience tackling complex urban challenges at local, national, and international scale. His focus is on the interrelationship between multimodal mobility networks, urban design, and real estate market dynamics in order to deliver successful, enjoyable, and sustainable places. Kennedy serves on the board of directors for the Dallas Area Rapid Transit DART and teaches master's level sustainable urban development in SMU's Lyle School of Engineering. He's co-founder of the Coalition for a New Dallas, a political action committee dedicated to electing, educating, and empowering local leaders in support of revitalizing Dallas neighborhoods. He has awards from NCTCOG, Greater Dallas Planning Council, APA, AIA, AIGA, and ASLA. Lots of awards. Julia Ryan is the director for the City of Dallas Planning and Urban Design Development, and also serves as the interim director for the Office of Historic Preservation. The Planning and Urban Design Department develops and facilitates comprehensive plans, leads targeted neighborhood revitalization efforts through community engagement, and facilitates implementation of the city policies and programs. Julia has degrees in urban and regional planning and environmental studies from Eastern Michigan University. She has over 16 years of public sector planning and implementation experience and has worked extensively on moving ideas and planning visions into implemented policies and infrastructure. Julia is driven by the philosophy to leave the world better than she found it. And finally, Tamela Thornton. Tamela is the executive director of the Urban Land Institute Dallas-Fort Worth District Council, with responsibility for thought leadership plus business and policy strategy. She brings over 30 years of experience in real estate management, economic development analytics, and real estate development to the role of leader of the 1,700-member council. Previously, she was a partner with E. Smith Legacy Holdings, a real estate solutions firm, serving as president of E. Smith Communities and head of client services for E. Smith Advisors. Tamela has extensive knowledge of many domestic cities as well as international markets. She holds bachelor's and master's degrees in regional science from the University of Pennsylvania and is on the advisory boards of the Trust for Public Land, Texas, and the Dallas Zoo. Let's welcome our panelists.
Thank you, Eurico. Thank you all for coming out, and I'm going to have to go quick here, but appreciate you being here to listen to me ramble before our more esteemed guests can speak. So first things first, I want to promise to you that I'm not going to talk about highways today. I will not talk about the damage that was done to cities or the people that were displaced. I will not talk about how they were intentionally routed through black and brown communities. I will not talk about how no matter how wide we widen them, they do not actually solve any problems, in fact create more problems, nor will I talk about how they were pitched as a way to improve safety. But when you look at this heat map of traffic fatalities the last 5 years in Dallas, you can see that they all map pretty strongly to high-speed roads and highways. So I will not talk about any of these things tonight. Instead, I would like to talk about a wholly unremarkable building and set of buildings called Blocks 580 and 581 that are now about 26 years old, so 1 year older than the Architecture Forum or how long Eurico has been here. But I want to talk about this development because it breaks all the rules of how urban development is done here in Dallas today, and it does so in a way that actually increases and retains value in that development. So first thing I want you to notice is how it breaks up the scale. There's not just cramming in as many units in one type of building as possible. There are townhomes, there's 4 stories. This is one of the first Texas donuts or the 4-story stick wrap product and mid-rise buildings, and they're all sort of situated into these 2 blocks. The other rule that they broke was to actually invest in the public realm outside of the private boundaries where there was great creative streetscape design, one of the first sort of WUNRFs or curbless shared space streets. All of the alleyways and carriageways are all bricked. They preserved existing trees where possible. The other thing that they did was hide the mechanical. This is something that now I see new developments and transformers are dropped right in the middle of the sidewalks, right? but they actually tucked them around sides of buildings. They hid them back by the garages that are internal to blocks or tucked into little nooks and crannies in the alleyways and buildings. Another thing that they did, which a lot of developments don't do these days, is that they actually broke the slab, that the ground floor, the finished floor elevation of the ground floor is actually the same as the sidewalk. So second floor is the same across, but the internal ramping in the building actually allows this. You can't really tell, but there's actually like 3 or 4 feet of rise in this. So all of the retail and ground floor units are actually flush with the public realm and the sidewalk. Rule 5. The development and the developers refused to widen any of the streets. So when the developments were being proposed, and this is the original planners telling me about this, that the city said, well, if you're going to add density, we got to widen some of these streets. Well, they said, no, we actually like the streets exactly the size that they are. Fun fact, 30 years of development in Uptown, population has gone up 10 times. The traffic counts are all the exact same as they were in the 1990s. Didn't actually need to widen any of the streets because people are getting around different ways. Another rule that I guess they could say is broken is that they were willing to actually add ground floor flex and retail space from the jump, and took about 5 years for any of this stuff to lease out. A lot of time they were using it for leasing, center, fitness, but eventually over time it started to fill in as neighborhood support retail, restaurants, boutique retail, and there's still some fitness centers and some small office and some residential as well. But the key to that is that you can't just add ground floor retail anywhere. You can't just live above the shop anywhere, right? Context matters, and that's where I want to focus on some other developments, and that urbanism is not rote, right? It's not just copy-pasting these sort of kit of parts, right? There's a full ecology that you have to have. And so we look at this development, we say, oh, wow, people living above the shop, that's great. Ground floor retail, that's all great. Now let's pull back a second. What is this building actually contributing out into? I'm assuming this is public realm. I don't know. It's probably actually private parking lot. What is this parking lot actually contributing into that building? And that's what I really want to talk about is what are the interrelationships of property? Is this development contributing positively outwards, which then reciprocates because the surrounding developments then create value or rise in value and then reciprocate and add value back in to the development? And that's really where I want to talk about is the value of interconnected street networks and the way that street networks are the framework for creating and retaining lasting value. So this is a building I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. It's called Sylvan 30. It was the first development after or during the West Dallas plan was created by the city of Dallas in the early 2010s or so. Think of it what you will. Well, at the time, this is the site before it was built, and some of the neighboring stakeholders were worried about the proposed development, asked me to come in and say, what are some other ways we could actually build this rather than being an 800-foot-long bar building on stilts 100 feet up in the air? So any time where somebody's like, we want to actually maximize the views, they're not interested in actually creating value around the area, because if you create value, then you're going to lose your views because somebody else is going to build there anyway. The value is not actually in the location nor in the public realm, so there's no value to be retained. The other issue was the city said, hey, we got to build a traffic light here to go into your private drive into this parking lot, so all your retail is going to face inward. So the entire development is faced inward rather than outward into the public realm. This is kind of the fundamental failing of the West Dallas plan because there wasn't maximum block size. So blocks get as big as possible. Once they get big, they're just going to turn inward and to face where people are accessing, because people are accessing via the parking lot. And so this is one of the schemes that we came up with, but it was the same idea. It was like, instead of this, if we're going to have a traffic signal, let's have that traffic signal go to an actual public road, and that public road then could lead to an actual phasing strategy to the surrounding area, so it actually contributes value that can grow and grow and grow. And then ultimately maybe this USPS facility can relocate and we can have higher and better use there, and it can all be interrelated, interconnected street network. And the purpose is that if you have small enough blocks, not too small that development is not efficient, but that it disciplines development so the development has to face outwards and it's contributing value outwards. Again, so it has a relationship with the public realm and the properties nearby, rather than saying we want to internalize all the value, which is a recipe for long-term degradation. Only reason I show sort of this full plan is that in that actual initial boundary, we were able to actually have more retail square footage, more residential units, a larger program in that scheme. But alas, development has followed in. You could say, well, it's been successful financially over time. I'm going to argue that long term, this does not have the same kind of success that Block 580 and 581 have, that are now 26 years old, that are still getting $2.50 to $3 in rent. Same kind of rents that brand new buildings are getting at high ends, even though they're 26 years old. And so phase 2 actually happens to be gated. It has a private drive all the way around it. It has zero relationship to phase 1 whatsoever. And a similar issue is happening in Near East Dallas, where development has finally, or investment has finally spilled over 75 out of Uptown into sort of the Ross Avenue corridor, but it's all about cramming as many units in as possible. There's no sense of placemaking, but that means it's not without opportunity. So we have to think, okay, where is the opportunity? If land costs start getting too high, the city's not going to come in and say, okay, where are we going to put some public space or whatnot? We can rethink where some public land is. So I've highlighted DHA property here, where there's on about 25 acres, there's about 240 units of affordable housing in 1970s, so 50-year-old housing. Why can't these be in better units? Why can't the public sector partner with the private sector to say, let's deliver 300 affordable units, 1,000 or however many we want, market sector or market units, and also have it be mixed use, so there is amenities and jobs for people that don't have to live in a gated facility, because the question is the gate to keep people out or to keep them in? So actually, how do we turn DHA housing into something more humane? What else can we be doing? So I just want to talk a little about some of the things I'm working on, which includes the two-way conversion of McKinney, Cole, Carlisle, and Allen corridors throughout Uptown and the Knox area. We're only 5 years behind schedule, but it is fully funded. But the key to this is not just to take these raceways and turn them into neighborhood main streets. It's to rethink the intersections where the one-ways come back to the two-way grid, where we can recapture all that extra pavement and turn it into people space. So instead of roads just sort of crashing through in all sorts of different directions here and people playing Frogger to get across the street, there's actually controlled, safe crossings where pedestrian desire lines can move through a safe, attractive environment in all directions, creating a new center of town for Uptown. An idea I pitched, about 10 years ago to the city and the property owners at Oak Farms across the river from downtown in Oak Cliff was to start removing some of these bridges and flyovers. Same issue. This is what we call confluences, where a lot of these one-ways are 20th century infrastructure. It's about just ramps and one-ways and all sorts of things that have a negative effect on the public realm as well as onto the private real estate around it, is to actually rip out a lot of this ramping, turn Jefferson Viaduct into a two-way street, and rethink the Houston Viaduct as a bike, pedestrian, and streetcar connection, which allows us to create more land for development, connect into the surrounding street grid. Michael Morris at Council of Governments has been interested in this and trying to raise about $50 million for new bridges there. Similar issue. I don't know who had the idea to design Pearl and Cesar Chavez the way they are, where Cesar Chavez just gets off the highway just to get back on, and Pearl Street just dead ends. But even without thinking about 345 here, we could connect Cesar Chavez to Pearl and create a very good, basically our Miracle Mile. Like, where is our Miracle Mile? Where is our Van Ness, our Wilshire, our Michigan Avenue? Where is that great urban boulevard that we could redevelop? And this could tie into all the East End downtown development. Take Pearl further to the north, and we come up to this spaghetti, where a long time ago somebody asked me, how do we walk from my job at the Crescent to the American Airlines Center? So it's a 5-minute walk, but nobody wants to do it. They take Uber to go to Mavs and Stars games because the roads are so hostile. And forgive me turning the north arrow a little bit, but I started pulling on the thread and said, what if we actually take Harry Hines and McKinnon and said, what if they became two-way roads? Okay, all of a sudden now we've got some boulevards that we can create. We can create roundabouts at these punctuation points as a sense of arrival into Uptown and the downtown area. But also you can actually pull them apart. So rather than all these ramping structures coming back together, you can pull them apart next to Reverchon Park, and you now have a walkable urban boulevard with some new development potential. What else we should be doing? We should be creating transit-oriented development districts at every single one of our DART stations. We're at one now, but we should be doing this everywhere. This happens to be Westmoreland, which is the end of the red line in Oak Cliff. You've got a 20-minute train line to 100,000 jobs in downtown. You've got a high-frequency bus line going up Westmoreland to the medical district. This should be great development potential that could be a downtown for Southwest Dallas. But right now it's all industrial research zoning. From what I understand, the jobs have dropped from about 2,000 to 500, and this is a great opportunity to rethink all of this land. Similarly, related to industrial research zoning, we've got the design district down here, which has been happening sort of one property at a time. All of that towards the river, 2 square miles, is all industrial research zoning, sort of the original inland port. But that's 2 square miles. That could be, it's right next to the medical district. It's right on the Trinity. That could be 30, 40, 50,000 homes for people with new TRE stations if we want it to happen. I guess lastly, or second to last, is what we're working on at DART. We're working on a facilities master plan. We've got 24 acres of a bus maintenance facility that has to serve all the way up to Plano and all the way down to Pleasant Grove. We spend a lot of time and money deadheading buses there. So we're rethinking where our facilities actually should be. And what could this be? Could we ground lease that out? Could that become housing, development? It could be tax-based to the city. Similarly, the city should be thinking the same thing. With their city service yards next to Deep Ellum. And the last thing that I'm focused on right now is that we've got 2 streetcar lines. They are disconnected, of course. And everybody's been focused on how do we turn these 2 lines into one line? Well, one is a historic line, one's a modern line. You can't run the modern trains all the way up McKinney Avenue. I think we've been too focused on how do we turn these into one line, where we need to be thinking, how do we connect all of the downtown 360 geography, every neighborhood around downtown, in one transfer, right? Because you can't have a single seat ride everywhere. How do we connect everywhere to everywhere here in a single seat line? So we need to be thinking about that and then stepping back to say, what are our first phases? And with D2 pushed off into the distance, we've got the financial capacity to deliver this. We just need to be working with the city to say, how do we upzone a lot of this land and how do we capture some of that value to pay for the operations and maintenance to build a really high quality streetcar network and a great downtown. Especially if we're not going to take out highways, we got to connect these neighborhoods somehow, right? And then lastly, you just have a bunch of policy issues that we should also be working on, but we can talk about that during Q&A. So thank you all. Look forward to the conversation.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I am very excited to be here, and thank you all for coming to listen to us talk about our different expertise and specialties. So I'm going to give you sort of an insider's view of the city of Dallas and some of the issues and things that we're working on, some of the exciting things, but also some of the dirty laundry. So I take a little different view. Over the last 2 years that I've been with the city of Dallas, part of what I've been seeing is that is our past better than our future? And when I look at things like this beautiful duplex within one of our conservation districts and thinking about over the last couple years, the attempts that we've had in trying to get density within the city of Dallas and trying to wrangle with this issue that we all know as affordable housing crisis. Where are we going to put all these people that are coming? We know they're coming. Are they going to come to Dallas? Do we have places for them? Do we have places for the services, the service industry employees that are going to be here? Right now, the answer is no. But we did have. And as Dallas developed a long time ago, we had some of these natural, gentle densities within the neighborhoods, like this duplex or this duplex. And these are very, very attractive places for people to live now. Everybody wants to live in these places, right? This is... I can't recall the specific address, but these are areas that have been developed. There are amenities nearby. One of the constant things we hear when we go out to neighborhoods is, man, I'd really love a wine bar nearby. Doesn't everybody? But the answer is you have to be able to deal with the density that comes along with being able to have the things that you can walk to. Do you want to walk to a Starbucks or any other better coffee place than Starbucks? You need to have the density. So this is a really great quadplex that's out there for sale, and this is in East Dallas. And these are the places that we've really looked at over the past probably 20 years and been able to invest in, right? Bishop Arts District. Everybody likes to go to Bishop Arts District. There's great things to do. There's places to eat that are really great. There's residents nearby. There's places to live. Can you afford it? Probably not. But would you like to? I think a lot of people would, and especially as some of the younger people are coming into this world and trying to make it on their own, they want to be able to live in these places where they can not drive places. I have a nephew who's 24. He didn't want a car. He wanted to walk everywhere. He wanted to be without a car because he saw all of the burdens that his mother, my sister, had in having to drive him, all the costs associated with those kinds of things. And so he just rejected it. And that's really natural. And that's something that's been more of a trend that you'll see in the young people. And I think that, it's just going to continue. And so as developers have invested in these places, they've really taken off. But the affordable housing and that density nearby is really problematic in that we can't have people live nearby because they can't afford it unless you are older. So we've got a problem, and we really need to talk about this. And the problem is scale. I love density. I want a lot of density, especially near transit. This is the kind of scale that we cannot deal with. We have a lot of developers who are taking advantage of areas that have been traditionally lower valued and are building, maximizing that scale. So this is an example. Would you want to live next to that? Would you want that house to be yours? Probably not. But there is things you can walk to, right? And so you think, okay, well, there's density. That's great. But we need the right kind of density. And these are things that are happening within our neighborhoods, and especially our neighborhoods where, again, we've had more modest residential dwelling units, that those places have been affordable. So this is in West Dallas, where you've got a historic church that is now very out of context with the adjacent development. Even worse. This is in, I think, Elm Thicket. And if you followed any of the news with Elm Thicket, you'll know that this was a very racially charged issue, in that, a lot of the development was coming in, was displacing a lot of the residents who have been there for a lot of years. And the thing that we don't want to do is we don't want to take the existing affordable housing out in benefit of some of these really large developments. So this is, these areas have been advertised, if you look on Zillow, basically anywhere in West Dallas. It's starting to come to South Dallas and Southern Dallas. Advertised houses for $500,000 as teardowns. And thinking about what that does to those existing populations and the people that live there. I've never lived in a place long enough to be able to have that kind of experience, but I've had conversations with people that have multi-generational houses within areas. And I can't imagine what that is like for them to lose their home because they can't afford the taxes now. So we really have to work on these kinds of things. You probably all saw this earlier this year about the Tron house, again, in Elm Thicket. The epitome of excess. You could buy, I think, the Porsche that came with it as a decoration. And so again, this is that traditional neighborhood where the people who were redlined moved to in the 30s and 40s. And now we've got gimmicks and Hollywood houses. We've got really large, ugly parking lots. You can think about anywhere that you've been in the past probably 2 days, and you will see a very large empty parking lot. And the value that this could be, that it's not, because it's a very large parking lot that's also very empty, is a very sad waste of space. The fact that the city could be getting a lot more revenues from this land, but we require this. As part of your development, you must build this amount of parking. And in, I think, 2012, we amended our parking code. Guess what? We added parking. So this is a problem. You think about runoff, you think about the heat island effect, especially on, a day like today or last week, when maybe you wanted to go to the mall. I don't know, people do that these days still. And you walk through the parking lot. Who wants to do that on a day like today when it's 100 and something and it's in the middle of asphalt jungle? But we've been doing this for a while. And so what we've ended up with is a lot of commercial corridors that are underutilized. And these could be something more. If you think about Patrick's examples of some of the development that we could put in there, where maybe you have a mixed use development where those same stores could be, but you build up and you've got housing. And we know that supply is a big deal, and we can't get enough supply right now. And that's a problem because we have a real issue with trying to get any kind of units within the city of Dallas. This all probably looks familiar to many of you. This is the former Blue Star, as we're required to say. This is another issue that we're dealing with, and it's environmental justice. There are a lot of areas around Dallas, and I was really surprised about the extent of environmental justice issues that we have as a city. And we are absolutely working on this, but it takes time because we have a code and we don't have land use that oversee these kinds of things. And so you end up with things like this where we just allow this, right? And this is not acceptable. So we are working on vision, and there are people and there are developers that have been working towards changing the fabric of Dallas, and this is great. So examples where people are reusing spaces within parking lots for different things. Obviously, today you would want a tree or something else sitting outside. We've got spaces where we used to have a really ugly road that was probably underutilized, and now it's a public space. We've got this area, which is, like it or love it, flaws or not, it is a transit-oriented development, and it is an example of something that we can start using. This is an old example, and we haven't replicated it, but we need to start looking at our other transit stations and being able to reconfigure, redevelop these areas so that transit becomes attractive, which it's not right now if you've been on a light rail in a while. So this is another example. So this is UNT Dallas. This is a rendering that was put together of some examples of potential redevelopment. Again, this is near a transit station, UNT Dallas. It's in southern Dallas, where a lot of amenities and resources are not. And these are things that we could do to bring in some of that density that allows the ability for amenities to happen within other areas. This is Southern Gateway. Southern Gateway. So the deck, I think, just completed, and so I know that there are a lot of plans for a deck park, and there's an example when we get this back up of what that might look like. One of the things that is out there that is a concern, I think, of some of the areas is the potential gentrification that it's going to bring. There are a lot of, in South Dallas and Southern Dallas, with, that kind of development, gentrification is a natural occurrence. And again, how do we keep that from displacing the people that have been there for a long time and who have put up with the city of Dallas for that long, that should be allowed to stay. So there are a lot of tools that the city's working on, a displacement toolbox, to be able to allow people to stay in their homes. So that may be things like freezing your taxes or, providing homebuyer assistance or maintenance assistance within those current properties. Hensley Field, this is a really exciting project that was just passed last year, master plan from the city of Dallas. This is the former Naval Air Station Dallas on Mountain Creek Lake. This is a really exciting project, again, in southern Dallas, and we're really trying to bring, again, that density and some of the really innovative things that are part of sustainable development, things like net zero and carbon neutral and transit compact, walkable development, and adaptive reuse. That's also really important when you're talking about reusing existing facilities. That is a very sustainable practice. This is one of the old hangars that we're proposing to develop into a public space for the people that are living out there and the people that are around there. So we are working, and we've got a really great staff, and I know some of you are in the audience, so thank you for coming. I've seen some of you of our planning and urban design loyal folks. So they are very passionate and dedicated to being able to make the city of Dallas a better place. And a couple of the things that we are working on that are very important. One is Forward Dallas. This is our comprehensive land use plan. The city does not have a comprehensive land use plan. That is a problem. Most cities have a comprehensive land use plan. Now, there was a 2006 land use plan, with the problem being that there was a disclaimer that said this is not a land use plan. So what a land use plan is, and the reason it's important, is that it tells the city, it gives the city the vision and the guidance on how it should develop and where certain things should develop. So if there's affordable housing problems, if there's economic development problems, if there's displacement problems, it's a land use problem. And there are a lot of land use problems in the city of Dallas. And a lot of that is because we don't have a citywide land use plan. So our staff are working on this Forward Dallas update, and we are a couple months away from beginning some of the final engagement around Forward Dallas and this future land use plan. So please do keep this in mind. We have a website. Keep updated on the public meetings that we're going to be having. This is a very critical component for the city of Dallas to be able to move forward and provide the strategic planning that's necessary for us to be able to actually implement any of the goals and any of the good things that we need to do. And the last thing I'll talk about is the most exciting thing that I've ever been a part of. And it's not this map. It is about the zoning code reform that City Council passed a contract a couple weeks ago to overhaul the city's development code. So I am so excited about this. This has been something that we've been advocating for quite a while. It is a broken code. And as you've seen in some of those previous pictures, that we need to address a lot of the development issues that we're seeing. This is an outcome of a broken development code. Our development code, if you'd like to live in a modern city, Dallas is not it, because our zoning code was last updated in 1987. That was built on a zoning code from 1965. That is not a modern city, and that does not make a modern city. So what have we done? We've used this PD, which is a plan development, so your customized zoning. So this is your customized zoning. So instead of saying, you're going to build a multifamily here, and this is the general, whatever that's part of that, or single family, we've created these little custom areas. And then within those custom areas. And then within those, right? And so it just keeps going down and down and down. And so we look at the things that are coming out with the permitting issues. Well, I don't know. So you're in PD 298, subarea 10C. What can you build there? I don't know. You got to look at that. And then you got to look at the regular PD, and maybe that refers you back to the base zoning. I don't even understand that. So we've built this system around modifications and really trying to get around our current zoning. And it's created all these problems that have bled into other things like permitting, like code compliance, illegal land use. All of these things can go back to our old zoning code. So this is a major, major initiative that we've started. $2 million up front. We've got another million and then another million after that in the next budget years. Is it going to cost more? Absolutely. But we need to take a measured approach as we move forward and be pragmatic about really what that outcome is going to look like. But also be involved and speak up. If you want good things in Dallas, this is the opportunity. And so is Forward Dallas. Thank you.
So good evening, everyone. What I'm going to do is really give some additional context that I think will ultimately lead us into some of the conversation and the question and answer and interplay that we would like to get from the audience. But really, if you talk about just this conversation that we've been having about urbanism in Dallas, and we also think about some of the statistics that we shared earlier, part of when we talk about Dallas, we're actually talking about a region. And so when we think about what are we talking about, we've got clearly some opportunities, some of which we've discussed. The ongoing in-migration. Within the cities themselves, we're seeing some of the linchpin activities like downtown parks, multifamily construction, diversification of the employer base that are going on. We're also seeing within the city some specific activities that were designed to address some of the disparities that have occurred in the past, but we still will see within that region some challenges and then some very specific gaps. On the challenges side, and I think some of the statistics that we've seen earlier indicate that one of the benefits that Dallas has always touted was that we are affordable, an easy place to live, and a great place to do business. We're starting to lose that affordability bonus, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the future. But we also are starting to see that we've got some sporadic opportunities for walkability. We've got some infrastructure challenges. We've got some legislative challenges around property taxes and what that is starting to do to affordability. And then we still have some very fundamental gaps in what's going on in Southern Dallas. To a certain extent, what's going on with our education and our workforce, which in many instances is as a result of the affordability challenges that we're starting to see in the marketplace. And then just some basic confidence that we're seeing in what's going on in the metro area as a result of the growth and as a result of some of the challenges that we as this metroplex, who always think that we're the miracle, sometimes either tended to overlook, gloss over, or actively ignore. So can we deliver what everyone talks about as the Texas miracle? And that's really, if you talk about urbanism and this conversation, it's about really what can we do to create authentic environments. As I said, Dallas, Fort Worth, and all of the surrounding cities and areas, we're really very much a polycentric environment where we've got Plano, we've got Frisco, we've got Arlington, we've got Fort Worth. All of those different municipalities in and of themselves are trying to create vibrant quality environments for their residents. But if you think about how the outside looks at us, that's Dallas. And so if we don't think about each of those environments and how they ultimately work together, ultimately we're going to start seeing some cracks in the fabric of this environment that we're creating. One of the things that often it's uncomfortable to talk about, but we have to address, is the fact that historically in this market, planning was really used as a cover. And it was a cover for investment in projects that were selectively beneficial. You would invest in development in State Thomas, which was a historic community that functioned. And in that investment, through either the construction of the highway or some of the additional redevelopment, you ultimately had some displacement of individuals and solid commercial activities that through either investments, planning, design, support could have been functional or could have improved their functionality. So that's something that as an economy, as we're starting to look at how this goes forward, those are areas that we're going to have to pay attention to. Then we're going to have to look at some really basic, fundamental, transactional challenges that are really more industry focused. If you think about investment, particularly investment in areas like some of that we'd looked before that haven't necessarily seen a lot of activity or could represent opportunity, you have to take yourself through the calculation that often the individuals who are funding this growth go through, which is the appraisal and valuation process. In many of these environments, you haven't had really solid commercial transactions that have occurred consistently in a number of years. So if you have no transactions, you don't have comparable sales. You don't have comparable valuation metrics. If you don't have comparable valuation metrics, then you end up getting appraisals that understate the inherent value of communities. And so places where there's been lots of activity, North Dallas, Northern Dallas, there's a basis for financial institutions to say, yeah, I'm going to take those bets in those environments because they've seen, and any of you who are bankers know, bankers don't do anything that's risk-based. So they're looking for proof. They're looking for proof of cover, and a transaction provides proof of cover. If you're looking in areas that could be redeveloped or that are prime for facilitating this conversation that we're having around urbanism and density, often those areas haven't had significant transactions, so it's really hard to understand what value is. And if you don't understand what value is, then a developer or an investor or even an individual landowner who wants to go out and get financing to redevelop their asset, you go to a financial institution, they say, we don't believe, or we can't invest in you because your math on paper doesn't look investable. That becomes a challenge for smaller scale developers. It becomes a challenge for individual homeowners who then will find themselves priced out from a property tax standpoint, but with the inability to actually go get financing to potentially improve their existing asset. And then what that does is it kind of can influence how we create what I'll call interesting, accessible, visually attractive, and authentic environments. I mean, we've seen places that have been created, blocks that have been created, but they're not necessarily authentic because they haven't been natively grown, and they don't necessarily reflect an environment where you've got diversity, not just in terms of ethnic diversity, but you've got income diversities, you've got commercial diversity, you've got housing option diversity. All of those factors are what really tend to drive sustainable, interesting, and ultimately strongly urban neighborhoods. So we've talked a lot about density, and we asked the question, can density really mitigate some of those challenges, and particularly affordability challenges for individuals who are currently living in certain environments? If you just look at some statistics, and most of this is either census data or from some of the housing organizations like the Zillows of the world. As I said, the trends are challenging Dallas's affordability bonus. If you look at single-family housing prices, they've increased since 2000 by over 100%. If you're a property owner, that's a wonderful thing. If you're a property owner whose income hasn't grown at that same rate, then you ask yourself, how am I going to pay my taxes? If you're a renter who can't afford to buy a house because you can't get in the market, you're looking at rents that over the past 3 years increased by 25%. all of a sudden, folks are having to make trade-offs around where do I live, how do I live, and what is important in where I live. So as a result, we're looking at about 52% of the county residents in 2021 who were housing cost burdened. And typically that means that you're paying more than 35% of your income on housing. Basically, that also says we've got about 41% of county households who are considered low income. And in this environment, I don't think anyone would have ever imagined that if you're earning less than $62,000 within the context of this market, based on some of the jobs that are coming in, as well as people who are in migrants from higher wage areas, East Coast, West Coast, you've got a significant portion of the population that simply can't afford to live in the assets that are being developed, if those assets are being developed, because we also have a pretty significant gap of housing units that actually need to be built for the population that's moving in, as well as the population that's currently existing here. So we've talked about what are some of the solutions. Some of those solutions might be looking at the zoning code, as Julia mentioned, but also encouraging different housing typologies. You know, in this market, we've grown in a more traditional suburban model where people wanted single-family houses with a front lawn, a backyard, a driveway, and a garage. Maybe we need to have a little bit more density. Maybe we need to think about townhomes, duplexes, accessory dwelling units on single-family lots that would also facilitate multi-generational housing within an area. We also need to think about what does commercial look like in those environments, which may be thinking back and hearkening back to the corner store. When you've got areas where you're living in food deserts, sometimes those food insecurity challenges can be sourced in smaller environments, particularly if you're trying to encourage walkability and those other activities that build neighborhoods and build those environments that ultimately become financeable and interesting for somewhat larger retailers who also need to understand that they can and need to exist in different types of environments, which become conversations around what is scale and what are the factors that need to accompany that livable scale. It's landscape, it's art, it's sidewalks, it's parks, it's different housing types. And then you have to say, okay, how are we going to then embed equity? And equity, as I described it earlier, which is of income, race, housing type, in all aspects of development. So why is ULI part of this conversation? Essentially, I don't know how many of you know what the Urban Land Institute is, but the Institute, our mission is really about shaping the future of the built environment for transformative change around educating the next generation of leaders, decarbonization, climate, net zero, and increasing housing attainability. We do this as an organization by actually engaging in these kinds of conversations and then bringing these conversations to the research that we do around the globe. We're about community. We are the preeminent platform for research, conversation, engagement, and then collaboration across markets. And we do that, as I said, through our programs and our events. But we also do that through education. And part of the reason that, this may sound a little bit like a commercial, but part of the reason that we do this is because there are a couple tools and processes that we've put in place to really encourage potentially disparate populations to talk to each other, to work together, and to figure out how to potentially work on creative solutions. One of the most interesting things that we do is an exercise. It's actually just a fun exercise. It's called Urban Plan. And really what Urban Plan is it's a game-based program which is exposing different communities to some of the basics of good development and taking people out of their traditional comfort roles, encouraging them to play the role of someone else who may or may not live in their community, and then asking them to plan an environment. What does that do? That forces people to say, I now understand why developers may make the decisions that they make, why municipalities may make the decisions that they make, why public officials may make the decisions that they make, what influence community organizations, neighborhood activists have on those decisions. And then kind of it also allows you to start the conversation from a basis that says, I have a little bit of a broader understanding of how this thing development works. And then we're also doing some other local programs that are really putting people together and particularly giving folks the practical opportunities to apply technical assistance on their own. Julia showed a picture of the mountain, which we don't actually call the Blue Mountain. We actually call it the Floral Farms, and I think what many of you had also heard of it being the Shingle Mountain. We took it upon ourselves in concert with the landowners in the area to do a technical assistance panel. And now the landowners came to us with an idea of what they thought the results should be. We had the ability to bring a series of professionals, architects, land use attorneys, what have you, to really dig deep into the whys of the site. I mean, what was happening is that the folks who live in the community, they have the top surface of, this is negatively impacting me, I got to do something about it, but didn't necessarily have the skills nor the experience to understand, how do I take my challenge and apply some facts around it so that when I advocate, or when I'm trying to advocate for myself or engage with my city planner or my city council person, I'm doing that from a position of knowledge and experience, and it encourages a lot more interaction and engagement. And so we ran a technical assistance panel. Did we tell the community that what they were thinking was the solution for that site was the best solution? No, we didn't. But we gave them some tools and some follow-up resources to allow them to facilitate a conversation. The other thing that we do is, and this is where I think some of the resources that we can bring to bear help these conversations. Because ULI is a global organization, we do a lot of best practice collection. And we publish this best practice information around building healthy places, creative placemaking, embedding racial equity in the decisions, around real estate economics and capital markets, around housing attainability, and then around decarbonization and climate. Really what we're doing is pulling tools, resources, and conversations and offering them to the marketplace as a means of starting the conversation, asking the questions, encouraging the dialogue that I think we're going to start into right now, that will help us go from concept, from challenge, and from your individual fiefdom where you don't necessarily have perspective, to an opportunity to actually engage and ultimately drive ourselves to decisions and processes and recommendations that benefit the collective community. And so with that, I'd like to open to the community.